Okay, here we go. Cool.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Chris McMillon here with truthconduit.com and Autonomy Season 1. Thank you, sir. I'm here with Daniel McCarthy of AgeofUtopia.info. Daniel, how are you?
Not too bad, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Hopefully we won't have any internet hiccups there again. So Daniel, what's the problem with Utopia? Why should people be concerned about it?
Well, I think that it's important for us to keep an eye on anybody who has promises of perfection or of some drastic improvement of the human condition following some particular action, which usually involves giving power or resources to small managerial classes. So an example of why we might want to pay attention to utopian thinkers would be the Soviet Union or communist China, where, of course, the promise was that, if only you support this revolution, if only you back the revolutionaries, the communists, then we will eradicate the oppressors and instantiate freedom and liberty and equity, health, justice for all, which of course sounds great. And so people say, okay, yeah, I can get behind that. And then what winds up happening, at least in the Soviet Union, communist China, a number of other places, is of course, the utopia never comes, and instead just piles and piles of dead bodies take its place. So this isn't to say that we shouldn't aim at creating a better society. It's just that we run into a big problem when, instead of getting to a better society by working on ourselves as individuals, by improving ourselves, our relationships, and I would say fostering voluntary relationships with one another, creating a real sense of community, there's that. But instead, people like to look up to the top of the pyramid, if you will, and say, oh, well, let's just give our power to this abstraction at the top of it. Or maybe there's somebody saying, I am the state embodied, so give me the power and I'll sort it all out. That's the problem. It's not fundamentally in trying to fix the future, it's in how we go about it. Whenever we cede our responsibility and our power as agents, as autonomous actors in the world, then you're going to run into some trouble.
It's just kind of like sales, isn't it?
That's a long way.
How can we sell? Yeah, it's like sales. How can we sell this idea that we can govern the whole world to the masses? Sell them utopia,
right?
The idea of the perfect society.
Yeah, and I think that is pretty much everywhere in political discourse. So I don't really think that, most politicians here, at least in this country, this is the one I know best, no politician gets up on the podium and says, if you elect me, we will have utopia. It's not that cut and dry, but I think that there are elements of it that sort of leak down. I mean, first of all, fundamentally, I think that any political action, sort of by definition, is utopian because the implicit assumption within politics, within the state that we have, is that good can be achieved through coercion. To me, that's a contradictory ends justifying the means sort of situation that sounds, to my ear, utopian, because you're going to attain something through extracting resources from third world countries, making money off of drug trades, illicit drug trades like the CIA has done for years. The list goes on and on of examples of the state or aspects of the state or corporations, the powers that be, using their position to basically do what most people would call wicked things, and all of this to preserve the American way of life. or something like that. At least that's how people will justify it. I don't really think that the people like, running drugs from, back in the Iran-Contra days, I don't think those guys were doing it because they entertained some illusion that, we're fighting for the betterment of society. I don't really think that. I think that they were making some money. But for the rest of us, the people who kind of see the proceedings on TV and do things that people might not really understand or might even find questionable, they'll just kind of dismiss it as, well, we don't understand the whole political landscape. They're just fighting the good fight. They're doing what needs to be done. So like with the wars in the Middle East, nobody likes war. Well, that's not true. Most people don't like war, but a lot of Americans anyway are willing to write off the wars in the name of some abstract idea of peace or freedom that they're fighting.
Or some type of patriotism.
Mm-hmm. Right. The sense of national collective identity is something that, that's, I would say, another utopian concept, because it essentially it imagines something that's not there. And the word utopia comes from the Greek ua and topos, which mean no place or nowhere. So this sort of American ideal is a mental construct. It doesn't really exist. It's not tangible, yet it's developed in people through media, school, culture, etc., the ongoing political games that we watch on television. All of these feed this sort of golem beast that doesn't really exist. It's a figment of the collective imagination, if you will. And the idea that we need to continue to foster that is, I believe, in pursuit of an idealistic society where we could all sort of be as one collective in the nation state. That could that thought could use a little more refined articulation, I think, but hopefully the idea is clear. Utopia is present whenever people are imagining things that are beyond the scope of what they will cost. So utopia is the kind of thing where when you hear it, you kind of say, that sounds too good to be true. Or, yeah, but what's the catch? And, in practical affairs, people are pretty good about that. People are generally quick-witted and pragmatic, But for some reason, when it comes to politics, they don't seem to ask those, what's the catch? Is this too good to be true? People just sort of take it for granted that, yeah, hey, man, this sounds great. Yeah, we've got a plan that'll fix the healthcare system. Let's do it. No matter what the cost is, the ends justify the means. Hey, we've got this problem of terrorism, man. That's really, really bad. Well, what are we going to do? Oh, how about we terrorize a few countries in the Middle East? That'll fix it, right? We can impose freedom, right? That's the thing. Sure. So it all comes back in my analysis at this point to this really paradoxical, contradictory, and very old notion that the ends justify the means. And you'll hear a version of that when people get really politically huffy. They say, by any means necessary. That's how you know.
Or the greater good, for the greater good.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
When you hear those two phrases, look the hell out, because somebody's got a bad idea and they're about to do something with it.
Daniel, I've really been enjoying the series you've been doing with Brett Veinotte at the School Sucks Project, going into real detail about the ideas of utopia. Just yesterday, in fact, I learned more about Francis Bacon from listening to the two of you talk about it than I knew. I learned loads. So if someone were to say Francis Bacon was an evil eugenicist bastard, would you agree or disagree?
I would probably 70 or 80% disagree. Just because for one thing, I don't really see much value in flipping through the annals of history, going back 400 years and trying to underline all the bad guys. I don't know, they were guys, you know, just like us, you know. People have wacky ideas. Um, I don't know if he was a eugenicist. Um, maybe the progenitor, technically speaking, they say that Francis Galton was the creator or father of eugenics. And this is one of those examples of something that is said over and over again. And I know why they say it, because Galton wrote extensively about why we should carefully cull the masses in order to gain some, you know, improved man. Here we go again with the utopian thing, improving human nature over time. But really, that's an idea that you could find in Plato's Republic. So is Galton the father of eugenics, or is Plato? Because there's a big difference in time there, isn't there?
Yeah.
But that's a tangent, I'm sorry. Um, as far as Bacon goes, I think that he did a lot of good. I mean, if it weren't for him, I don't want to say we wouldn't have the scientific method, but maybe we would have gotten it a generation or two later. Might be one way of thinking about it. He was very passionate about advancing the sciences. But he wasn't perfect, though, because I know in his lifetime he kind of ignored the works of, was it Galileo who was working back then? Or one of the major astronomers who lived concurrently with him, Bacon was kind of not really interested in. There were a number of people running experiments that wound up being rather important to modern science that Francis Bacon, ironically, didn't seem to care about. But he paid a lot of lip service to the philosophy of science, natural philosophy, as it was called in those days. And, you know, so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. With anybody really, even people who are living, nobody's perfect, and we're not living in a cartoon. You know, I think that there are clear-cut cases sometimes where we can say, damn, that's an evil guy. But usually things are just too complicated. You know, it's too difficult. So instead of, I don't want to like be in the business of casting people as either good or bad. I would rather separate them from their actions and say, well, that action was good, that action was bad, because that way it kind of leaves the person with the possibility of being redeemed, if you will. Like, you know, if you do something that's horrible, and I have two options. I could say, wow, that Chris is a really bad guy. Or I could say, hey, Chris, you did a really bad thing. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. Those are, maybe they sound semantically similar, but they lead to two very different outcomes. I think the more productive would be to just, let's look at the action, because people change. You know, I'm sure you've done things in your life that you wish you hadn't. I know I have, and we probably will again. So, you know, I don't think we've started any wars, and, you know, that maybe that's a different story. Like if somebody starts a war, maybe we do start to think of that person as consistently evil. But Francis Bacon didn't start any outright wars, although he did underwrite the early colonialization of the Americas, which of course we all know led to a lot of brutality and violence. Can we blame him for that? I don't know. I don't know enough about what the chain of command was, like if he said, you know, take care of whoever's there or what. But you know, to answer your question, you know, everybody's a evil bastard. Everybody who's ever lived is an evil bastard, and it's just, well, how much? So yeah, he is, but he's also a guy like the rest of us who, you know, he ate his food and he put his shoes on and his little buckled hat and went to work. You know, that's
Yeah,
about it. I don't know.
It's a common fallacy in today's media to focus on the messenger rather than the message. So one thing that I've learned to do, or get to do more consciously, is, okay, what's the message? Whereas the mainstream media will say, oh, this guy, they'll cast the person with the controversial message or act or whatever it is into that category. Alex Jones comes to mind. You know, he's been cast as this character, but the truth is, some of the things, especially his work in the past, he nails it. So the ability, Good. Are you there, Daniel?
Yep, yep. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
No, I was just reiterating what I said. It's important to focus on the message rather than the messenger, because like what you just explained, things are not just black and white. Well, cool. I'm glad I brought that up. Daniel, how's your book coming along?
Well, like every book project, it's tough because I'm really trying to. Well, the goal of the book was to come up with something like really tiny, um, for a number of reasons, but the most important one, honestly, is, there's that old saying that if you can't explain something simply, then you don't really understand it. And so I'm kind of operating on that assumption that I want to be able to, as quickly yet clearly as possible, articulate my utopian idea, justify my thesis, and then at the end, just here's what we could do about it. And of course, focusing on improving your own actions in the world and helping other people, yada, yada, yada. It's troublesome trying to pack all of this information into something short and sweet and to the point while still maintaining the gravity of all the things that I've learned. Um, so it's a very interesting harvesting process of information where, this just can't make it in the book and this has to, but I don't know where to put it. Um, so it's, I wrote 2.5 full drafts, and I was going, I say half because I started the third one, and the more I got through it, I liked it. I liked where I was going with it, but it got to the point where I thought, I need to stop. I need to put this down and kind of reassess the entire project, because it was becoming something that was going to start needing a lot of footnotes. It was going to need a lot of, just general references to different things. There were certain points that I would bring up and then not really explain. So it needed to be bigger. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to stop because this is supposed to be a small book. So, it's all well and good. Maybe one day I can write a big book, but right now I want to focus on just getting the basic idea really figured out in my own head, getting a short book out, kind of like a common sense style treatise, which would then point people to my website where they could find the more detailed stuff. I don't want to pack it all into one book because then what's the website for? Um, so it's coming along slowly, but that's okay. It's not like I've got some publisher's deadline to rush. I'm in charge of the whole project, so
Exactly.
no worries there. Yep, just so long as it turns out good. That's the important thing. So
The autonomous way is the only way, right, Daniel?
it's the only way. That's right.
I'm really enjoying, like I mentioned before, your series with Brett as well, and that's given you the opportunity to elaborate and kind of put a lot of these ideas on the table and work with them. And you guys are doing a really great job of playing with the various ideas that are around that the idea of utopia. Like I said, you've done 3 parts so far, and I think it's a great idea of what you guys are doing. Um, the series that you're doing with Brett, how many more episodes are you guys planning to do, or are you guys kind of just playing it by ear?
We're just go. It seems to be pretty indefinite at this point. We haven't put a number on it, um, and you know, like you said, and I've been typing up like these long, detailed, bullet pointed outlines and emailing him and like, all right, here's every point that we're going to talk about. It pretty much never winds up going according to that, which is good.
Yeah.
So I bring this up because the reason, or the way we wanted to do the show, and I'm happy that it seems to be working out this way, is more or less just casual conversation. We're not going to take you through a crash course per se on this history. We're going to talk around things. We're going to have fun tangents and stuff. So because that's the case, there's no like end point. There's no like one thing that we're building up to, and then once we talk about that, then we're done. So it just, however long we want, however long it is necessary until we have maybe just exhausted the topic. It's like, all right, enough already. Uh, once it gets to that point, then it'll, everything must end. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, the last part that we did, the show about the Enlightenment, was like twice the length of the other two that we had done. And that was just a blast. We just talked and talked and talked, and hopefully stayed on topic. um, but that's kind of what I'm hoping will continue to happen. Because in the first two shows, like I said, I had these grand outlines and stuff, just sort of for my own safety, if you will. Like just so I knew that I wasn't showing up to this guy's show with nothing. So I wanted to make sure that in case I kind of got frazzled, I had something to fall back on. But now that we're kind of getting in the groove of things, I'm probably just going to send like maybe 5 little sentences, like maybe we'll talk about this, maybe this, maybe this. And if we don't get to it, who cares? And we'll be fine. So it's becoming more conversational, it's becoming more casual. And I think that out of that will grow something that's even more productive, because the free flow of ideas back and forth, that's that's where productivity and potential lie, I think. So
Well, I would definitely recommend the series to anybody. I mean, personally, I've learned loads just listening to you guys talk. Really laying out the ideas, the historical ideas, everything. Like I said, I've only listened to 2 episodes. I have not gotten around to episode 3, but I found myself, taking notes on Francis Bacon. I did not know the New Atlantis had never been finished, for example. Loads of information there. I think it's fantastic. So Autonomy Season 2 is coming up. You are an Autonomy Season 1 graduate. How do you think Autonomy Season 1 has helped you?
oh well, I mean, aside from the fact that we're doing this, we of course know each other through Autonomy. um, I think that it's kind of gotten me to focus my effort. So before I was in Autonomy, I knew that I wanted to do something with media and talking about this utopian idea that I'm developing. But as to what I was going to do with that, I wasn't quite sure. I was kind of kicking the can around. Maybe I'll write a big book, or maybe I'll just make a little podcast kind of thing. But I wasn't really sure. I wasn't really committed to anything. And Autonomy has, in many ways and in many different aspects, helped me laser in on what, first of all, helping me laser in on how to make sure that I actually know what I'm talking about when it comes to this utopian thesis of mine. And the most important way to do that with anything is communicating with people. And that's one thing that Rich has, of course, really stressed throughout the whole Autonomy first season, and I'm sure it'll come up again in the second one a lot. It's this whole idea of communication, and how that's the most important thing. I mean, that's how you put your thoughts in somebody else's head. It's just pivotal. And so it's through exposing myself to different people like you, other interviews that I've done in the past that were like just on Discord, not recorded. And then, of course, this show with Brett, which I have to credit Autonomy for as well, because Brett and I decided that we were going to do this together while we were at the Red Pill Expo. Because I've known Brett for a couple years now, and we've always talked about doing something like this. But that this being together in Autonomy, I think, finally, kicked us over the edge and said, all right, let's figure out when we can do this. So there's that. And I've also got a better idea. I don't want to say perfect, but I've got a better idea of what I want to do with all this research and information that I've accumulated. So obviously doing interviews like this, the show with Brett, continuing to write my short book, which is another thing that was an idea that I had during the first season of Autonomy, and I credit Autonomy for that. The whole idea of clear communication, not having to just throw all of what you have at somebody at once, but instead just making somebody in Autonomy, I don't know who it was, I don't even remember if it was part of a lecture or just something somebody said, but somebody said a book is better than a business card. And that stuck in my head, like, oh, right, if I could just have a short little thing, nothing crazy, then people are going to get what I'm all about. And my website name is at the end of it. And so if people are interested, they'll go there. So that was the intent behind the book. So that's from Autonomy. Just I'm thinking about, well, more than thinking about, I'm planning and currently putting together the foundations of a podcast of my own, run from my Age of Utopia website. So that's exciting because it's just another opportunity for me to improve my skills of articulation and communication. I tend to ramble, as as you guys can no doubt tell, and so this process of like writing out a basic script, if you will, for a podcast will help me to just say what I want to say and then shut the hell up. So that's good. Um, I, so Autonomy has helped in so many ways, just, to sum up, helping me clarify what it is I think and helping me get what I think is important out there in a way that's valuable to me and to the recipient. And I think that pretty much sums up what the course strives to do in the first place, right? It's about communicating value. And I think that for me personally, if I weren't in that course, then I wouldn't be doing the productive things that I'm doing right now. I probably would be doing something, but not as productive and not as competent or defined.
So how is it now? What's going on? What do you have in the future going on? You're working on your book, you're working on your podcast, and you're doing your series with Brett. Is there anything else going on?
There is, just when you thought the plate was full enough. There's one more project that I want to facilitate in the very near future. And this has to do with anybody who's in Autonomy, be it season 1 or season 2 going in. In the first season, a group of people had gotten together and decided they were going to read the great books of the Western world. And this is something that I have wanted to do for a long time, but unfortunately, just the timing of it then, I didn't want to commit to reading these, dozens and dozens and dozens of books over a long period of time. I just wasn't ready for it. I had too much going on. But now, just in time for season 2, my situation has changed such that I actually can commit to doing that. So I've decided that instead of like trying to join their group that's already in existence and trying to like catch up and read what they already read, and then also running the risk of just expanding the group to the point where it's too big and not everybody gets to talk when they have their meetings, said, well, we've got a new season coming up. I can't be the only one who's interested. So I'm setting up a Great Books reading club for Autonomy Season 2. And it's going to have its own Discord server. So anybody who hears this and is interested, please, by all means, just send me a private message on Discord, and I'll send you an invite to the Discord server once it's set up. It's not quite done yet. And some PDF documents that I've typed up, giving you an idea of, here's what we're going to do, and here's why we're doing it in this way. So I hope that people will be interested. I'm really looking for just like 7 or 8 people. And because I don't want it to be like, everybody can only talk for 5 minutes in a 2-hour meeting because there's just too many. So I think that, like I say, I'm asking for 7 or 8, but if 20 people wind up wanting to do it, then we'll just create another group. But we can't mix them all into the same, because that's just not conducive to the sort of conversation that I think the great books elicit. Because these are, I mean, you're not going to agree with all of them, of course. That would be no fun if you did. But one thing that you can say about all of the books that are considered great in the Western canon is they're all worth talking about. Even if it's just saying it sucks, it's worth thoughtfully discussing. So that's really exciting for me. And I hope that I'll find some people who are interested in joining me in that endeavor. So like I say, anybody listening to this who is interested, just send me a direct message on Discord and we'll be in touch.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and it starts with how to read a book. That's usually the first book in when people take on this project, isn't it?
Yes, that is correct. And one thing that I'm doing, because I'm announcing this now, and I'll probably send some other thing out on Discord within the next week or two. And I also did recently an interview with Tony Rubrink, who he set up the season 1 club. And so we had an interview about the value of the great books and why it's important to read them. So I'll be releasing that shortly as well when I announce the season 2 Great Books Club to the larger Autonomy class. But because I'm presenting it before we're actually going to get started, well, I didn't mention that. I'm not like starting it the day that the first lecture of Autonomy is, right? Like I want to give people time to settle in, to really like be able to decide like, do I really want to commit to this? So I don't want to pour it all at once. So I'm thinking maybe around mid to late October is when we'd actually get started reading as a group. Once, just so people are settled into Autonomy, they've kind of gotten to know other people. So because I'm waiting, but I'm announcing it now, I've composed a list of books that if you're really raring to go, it's like optional recommended reading that you could do before we start. And it's things like Hesiod's Theogony and the Works and the Days. So those are Greek poems about the gods that either are contemporary with Homer or are just before him. So, and those are actually books I think should have been in the great books. Selections from the Old Testament, the Babylonian creation myth, things like that. Just really ancient stuff to kind of get you ready to read this odd, like, I mean, the after how to read a book comes the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are kind of strange to jump right into, right? Reading ancient stuff is weird. We're not used to the way they speak and how they personify abstractions like they do. So I thought it might be useful to give people a list of other myths just to kind of soften the impact when they do start reading. And so, like I say, it's optional. I'm not expecting everybody to have read these books once we start, but maybe it'll help those who are interested, and it'll give us something to talk about right off the bat, because these are all very interesting ancient books. So once I'm currently reading through all of them right now, the optional ones. And again, that's all posted, or I will post it to anybody who's interested in joining this group. But the first book that we're going to read together as a group will be, as you said, Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book.
And it exemplifies the depth that the depth and potential that the Autonomy classes have. That's just one of the many side projects that go on during Autonomy. So I think it's a great idea. I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops, Daniel. Excellent. Any final plug-ins or thoughts before we wrap up?
No, actually, I think that we hit everything. We hit the book, we hit podcast, the show with Brett, and the great books. That pretty much sums up my life right now.
Excellent. Very good, Daniel. Well, listen, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this morning, and I will see you very soon on Discord.
Absolutely. Hey, Chris, anytime you want to talk, let's do it.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.